Hi everyone, welcome back to the Admission Diaries, where we get up close and personal with the students from top universities around the world. Today we have an exciting guest who is studying at one of the Ivy League schools, Cornell University. Please join me in welcoming Hibah Khan. Hi Hibah.
Hi, how are you doing
I'm
today?
good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you for
taking the
joining us
time.
today.
Of course, I would love to give my insights and any advice I have on prospective students.
Thank you. So let's just jump into the questions right away. So Hibah, what does your university prioritize in a student application, and how should students highlight these aspects?
Definitely. So Cornell specifically, along with most of the Ivy Leagues that I've seen, have a very holistic approach towards how they want their incoming students to be. So it's not just about having a 4.0 GPA and not having 10 extracurriculars. It's about the strong GPA definitely is a factor. So if you're an undergrad, you want to target 3.7 to 4.0. That's definitely factored in. However, not the only thing. If you are engaging in any extracurriculars, make sure they're ones where you have a position in or something where you can talk a lot about it. So, for example, if you are a club in, if you have a position as a writer in like a publishing club, but you also have another position in like an art club or something, it's very clustered. So, that's usually not something that's recommended. It's more about quality as opposed to quantity. So you want to hone in on skills within one or two clubs and really showcase that. And another thing that they prioritize is how you are able to connect with Cornell's values. So it's not just about who you are as a person, but what can you bring to the table that will make Cornell or any other university better.
Right. So we're curious to know the key elements your university focuses on when evaluating applications. Are there any specific traits or achievements that stand out? I mean, in your experience, what aspects of your application do you think helped you stand out?
That's a great question. So, kind of piggybacking off of what I initially said, I feel like in terms of extracurriculars, that's where you can really stand out. So, personally, for me, so I was applied in the graduate cycle. So, undergraduate and graduate cycles have a little bit of a difference, but regardless, it's still similar. So during my undergrad, I did an internship at New York Presbyterian Hospital as a patient navigator intern. So I got a glimpse of project management skills in that, leadership in that, because I had to oversee other incoming interns. And I had a unique aspect of screening patients with social determinants of health, which is a relatively new topic in medicine, and that one that hospitals are trying to engage in. So that was something that really stood me out from other applicants. But some of my peers have very different backgrounds too. Like one of them is actually she's worked as a physical therapist before, so she's kind of doing like a second chance. She wants to go into the admin side, versus there's another person who has her master's in social work, but now she's more interested in this. So I definitely feel like extracurriculars are one of those things that can really distinguish people, because at the end of the day, you can have 50 applications with 3.8 GPAs and stuff like that, but it's really your experience that differentiates you, and also the recommendation letters you get. So it is required. You are supposed to have them, but that's another way where you can stand out, because whoever you gain that mentorship with, or whoever you're recommending to write your letter, should have a good character review. Like they should know your character so that they can describe it well in your letter. So I feel like those two things really do distinguish you and are elements that can make you differentiate.
Right. So, Heba, tell us, how important is the interview in your university admission process, and how should students prepare for it? Maybe can you share how you prepared for your interview and what you believe made a difference?
Definitely. So I do think it is valued because similar to your experiences or recommendation letter, that's another way where the committee can really get to know who you are as a person, the way you talk, your body language, all skills that they want to align with their program. So if they see a student that's excels in everything, but during their interview they don't have a positive outlook or their answers seem well rehearsed, that's something that they can catch and actually decline you for because they don't want that. They don't want someone in their program with that. So the way I approached it was one, I knew that I did not want to freak myself out because once I saw that I had an interview, immediately you kind of start getting nervous about it and thinking of all the things you're going to say. So I personally feel like there's a step approach. One, you should create an outline discussing points that you would like to discuss, which could include common questions asked. So like the all about me, which parallel with interview questions, like all about me, strengths and weaknesses. But then you should also research certain questions that are specific to your program or major that you're applying for. So, for example, specifically for mine, since I'm going into healthcare management, which involves a lot of leadership roles and how you're engaging with your team, I had questions like behavioral questions asked to me, like if there's somebody working in your team who's not putting their end of the work, what are you going to do? So those are the type of questions. Again, I haven't seen too much in undergrad. Undergrad is more basic and more of, explaining yourself, versus when you're applying for grad programs, they're looking more for, because you're going to the workforce right after. So that's personally what I've seen. And then back to the outline point, don't write down what you're going to say. Like, don't create a script. That's something that's like a big don't, because let's say I'm trying to engage in a conversation and all I keep doing is just like looking on the side, or if something freezes and I'm stuck, that's the worst thing that can ever happen. So you always want to remain calm and treat it a bit like a conversation, but not informal. So try to have an outline or ideas that you want to discuss with some research onto the school too, because you want to bring up key concepts that the school advertises in your interview also. So that could include a simple search of whatever program you want to do, look into a course that they offer, prepare a question that you want to ask them. That's also very important because that shows that you have done your research on the school and it's not just another thing on your list. You really are interested in that school.
Right. And I believe many students are anxious about the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, can you also discuss the role of demonstrated interest in your university admission decisions? I mean, does showing a strong interest in your university impact an applicant's chances, and what are the effective ways for students to convey their enthusiasm?
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think it's almost like an unsaid requirement too, because you don't want to have one essay or one outline for an interview that you apply to all the schools you are applying for. So two ways that I did it was one, in my essay that I had to write, my statement. Well, it was kind of required because they asked, they had a quote from Ezra Cornell, who's the founder of Cornell, and said that how does this resonate with your healthcare beliefs or who you intend to be? Like, how can this quote apply? And that quote is very generic. That can apply to everything because it had something to do with how everybody's welcome to learn no matter their race, religion, culture. So you have to use that quote and apply it. So that's one way. So even if your essay doesn't prompt that, you can still include that idea of wanting to belong to a school that promotes diversity as opposed to not being welcoming. That's one way. And then the second way, like I mentioned, is that during your interview, you want to express how excited you are going into the school. And again, by researching into a specific course or a specific club or an organization that that school offers, simply by stating how excited you are to be possibly a part of it, or even questions about it, that's something that they can look at as that you are interested in it. You took your time to research it, so they definitely do appreciate that.
Right. All right, Hiba, what are some common mistakes applicants make on their applications? I mean, avoiding pitfalls is a key to a strong application, but what are some of the frequent errors do you notice, and how can applicants steer clear for them?
So I think this is something I've seen amongst many, is that checklist concept of wanting to be a part of everything. So similarly to what I said at the start, if you are in 10 clubs or 10 organizations in multiple extracurriculars, they don't care, because it does not matter if you're the president of this and just a member of that. It's about how being this president has shaped you, who you are, and what have you gained from it. So if you have like 10 experiences, but you talk a little bit about each, that's not gonna look that great, as opposed to someone that has maybe three or four and they highlight one or two of their experiences because that really resonated with them and makes them who they are today. And then the other thing is trying to be this like perfect person that fits the generic idea of like what an Ivy League student should look like or be like. That's also something a pitfall, because I feel like then you are limiting your creative abilities, and really trying to search for who you are, as opposed to how can I be that person. You want to change your narrative to what do I like and how are my passions equivalent to what this school preaches for.
All right. What specific qualities does your university look for in prospective students? I mean, beyond academics, what personal attributes or extracurricular involvements does your university value most in the students?
So based off of just their guidelines, and then I'll kind of go into more of what I've seen amongst my peers. So with guidelines, I've seen again the extracurriculars are really important, and letters of recommendations, because they want to see who you are aside from if you can take a test and get a good grade. So I personally value extracurriculars a lot, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be clubs. You can, like I did, internships, you can volunteer at certain places, you can even initiate certain things. That's also something that a lot of universities like. So self-organizing a nonprofit group or something along the lines of that. That's also something that's very valued, because it shows one, entrepreneurship, it shows two, you're willing to take risks, and you're a leader. So that's an experience I think people should try to do. The other thing was amongst my peers that I've noticed is your attitude also. You want to be someone who people are not afraid to talk to, so that if I'm having a conversation with you, or if I'm down the road with you, everyone who's in my cohort I've seen very friendly people, very people who are encouraging with. It's not like there's one that wants to succeed and will let down everyone. That's something that I feel like I'm very glad to be a part of a community where everybody encourages each other and wants everybody to do their best. That's a quality you want to have inside of you, not the quality of I want to be the best and I don't care where everyone is. It's about how can we encourage each other and support each other so we all succeed.
Okay, so how does your university weigh standardized test scores in the admission process? The role of standardized tests has evolved as over the years, as we know. How does your university currently view test scores, and how much weight do they carry in the overall admission decisions?
That's a great question because I feel like this has been one of the hot topics, especially after COVID, because that's when it really changed. So, and again, undergrad and graduate have different testings and logistics like that, but both are optional. So for undergrad, it would be SAT/ACT or the SAT subject tests. And grad school is your GMAT or GRE. So I personally didn't take the GMAT or GRE because it's optional for grad students. And even the SAT is optional now. But I personally feel like if I were an undergrad, I would still want to take it because even if it's optional, it still has one sense of value in terms of how are you as a quick thinker. So you can have great grades and you can have extracurriculars, but if you want to have another enhancement to your overall profile, I still do think that, especially if you do well, that's something that you should submit to during the application process. But because it's optional, that also, in my opinion, increases the competition because if you have somebody who's not submitting their SAT scores, colleges would want to see what makes them really special if they don't have that. So I personally have like a 50-50 debate with this. I think that if you don't have too much experience or if you want to strengthen your application too, because let's say if you don't have a 3.7 to 4.0 GPA, you should strive to take the SAT or ACT, do well on it so that that can kind of compensate it. So I feel like it depends on each applicant and their where they are in the process, but it's definitely diminished where it's not, oh, I did not get a 1570 on the SAT, I'm not going to get into Cornell. So I do think that there's flexibility in that, but it should still be valued.
Right. So is there a minimum GPA requirement for admission? And how heavily is GPA considered in the overall application? How did your GPA influence your application? And do you think that there is a threshold students should aim for?
So they don't explicitly state, from what I was doing research for, especially for the grad programs, they don't state that. However, a ballpark of the 3.7 to 4 should be what you're aiming for. But again, if you are under it, I mean, I would say that if you have anything under a 3.5, you might want to, again, if you're in the standardized test, like, you know, whether you should take it or not, you should take it because I think 3.5 is kind of like the minimum of, again, unsaid rule because they don't say that, but it's what I've seen through statistics of applicants. So I would say 3.7 to 4.0, and then each program also has a minimum value that you have to maintain. So if you are already starting off with a low GPA, then you might have trouble maintaining that if hopefully you do get admitted, it might be a bit hard to kind of adjust to that. So to kind of answer your question, yes and no. So there isn't a minimum GPA, but it's the said rule that it should be around 3.7 to 4.0.
Okay. So how do you feel extracurricular activities impact the chances of one getting into a top university? And you think they play a significant role in shaping your future opportunities or career path?
I 100% agree to that. I think my extracurriculars honestly are ones, I mean, I don't know, I haven't talked to the committee, but I think those are ones that definitely distinguished me amongst other students and allowed me to get an admission to the school because, like I said, there are ways to make you stand out and also show that you can learn in an informal setting of how you would act in a formal setting. So for example, aside from my internship where I screen patients, I also volunteered at the mosque and I've been doing that since 2018. So it's going to be almost 6 years now. So there's that consistency that I want to give back to the community. And even if you don't think that's something that's worth putting, you probably do a lot more tasks within that you can phrase it in a way that applies. So for example, I taught students and I made lesson plans, and I also was in charge of fundraising. But I'm not going to say taught students only. You want to phrase it as what you actually did, which was I had to curate lesson plans, I had to organize meetings for fundraising events. I had to create logistics, create schedules of when we can meet up. So you want to include that into your application, because even if it's not something that you believe is not worth it, there are most likely there is going to be chances where you've done things that correlate a lot with careers like project management or whatever you end up deciding to do. So I personally do think they play a significant role, not even just getting into admissions, but who you are as a person.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, Hibah. Your story is truly inspiring, and I'm sure it will help a lot of people who are thinking about applying to an Ivy League school. Once again, thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed today's episode of Admission Diaries, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated and more amazing students for more amazing student stories. Please join us on our website, Prodigii.ai. And until next time, see you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.